Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to my new video. So this is a follow-up video to my previous one regarding the trade war 2.0 that Trump has started. And I'm going to ask a few questions. Namely, why didn't China retaliate earlier with the rare earths? Why are they doing it now? For example, why didn't they retaliate with the rare earths in Trump's first trade war? Well, I'm going to explain that all, and I've got some different questions as well, which I'm sure most of you have already, and I'm going to try and answer it for you. Before I start, I'm going to ask you a kind favor to watch the video to the end, because that really helps algorithm. Also to like and comment as well, so that also really helps as well. So without further ado, let's start the show. So you can see from this article, pressure from Trump led to 5G ban, Putin tells Huawei. So I don't know if most of you can remember that Trump, when he came on his first term, he started basically making enemies out of China. Before Trump, China had very, very good relationship with the United States and with the rest of the world, actually. And obviously, the pivot to Asia started with Obama, but Obama was never aggressive like Trump. Obama never started an aggressive trade war and started blaming trade war and started being racist and started, calling the COVID Wuhan virus. And, he was really, really aggressive towards China. And I think there came to a point where China and United States were nearly coming to a hot war. And I'm not kidding about this, guys. I think even I don't know if you can remember Mark Milley, he used to be a general in the United States. And he wrote in a column or in a book that, he had to call his Chinese counterparts to de escalate certain situations in the Taiwanese Strait, and he went behind Trump's back to try and de-escalate, a war and try not to kind of lead to a hot war. So Trump called him a traitor and things like that. So let's not go into that. But yeah, I think between Trump and in his first term, he was overly, overly aggressive, and he led to a lot of Chinese people getting targeted in America and the rest of the world. They were getting beaten up. People were being racist towards the Chinese. And Trump was he even kidnapped Meng Wanzhou as well, and he asked his Canadian puppet leader, what's his name, Trudeau, to kidnap her. And he also was, forcing other countries to ban Huawei as well. So, for example, you can see from this statement, Boris Johnson was the first. He got a call from Trump. Trump asked him to ban Huawei, and Britain banned Huawei based on no evidence whatsoever. And this was in the middle of Huawei basically setting up 5G infrastructure for Britain. And then Britain banned Huawei, and they had to roll back all the changes and all the infrastructure changes that Huawei did. And it took Britain 10 years behind the rest of the world. Britain has still not got 5G, by the way, and this has been more than, let's just say, 6, 7 years now. So they have not rolled back all the changes that Huawei did. They have not got 5G or real 5G. They got fake 5G, or you can call it a 4.5G, which is not very different from the current 4G. And they call it 5G, which is a gimmick. It's not really 5G. It's more like 4.5G, to be honest. It's not real 5G speeds. And what you see in China is still pretty much very slow internet in UK. And it's took UK back 10 years compared to the rest of the world. I mean, imagine all that technology that comes with 5G. You can be world leaders in so many different applications. Businesses can send massive amount of data towards each other. They can you can have automated self-driving. You can have really fast AI data centers. So all of this stuff, Britain has basically fallen behind the rest of the world. And if you don't have fast communication, how do you expect to compete with the major tech companies around the world? Britain has really shot itself in the foot. So let's go back to the trade war that Trump started in his first term. So I was always frustrated with China that China never really fought back in the first trade war. They never, for example, they didn't have these export controls on rare earths in his first term, and I wanted China to really hit back to America in the first trade war, and I was very frustrated that China did not. For now, looking back, I understand what they did, and I understand that whatever they did was the right choice. Because China in the first trade war was not ready. They were not ready for a full-on trade war with the United States. China's responses were very measured and calculated, and I think behind the scenes, they discussed it very much at length over what should be their situation. And I think rather than making a decision straight away, I think China waited. They said, all right, look, we're not ready for a full-blown trade war at that time. Because at the time, China was buying huge amounts of stuff from the United States. They were dependent on a lot of things from the United States, namely energy. They were buying huge amounts of gas and oil from the United States. They were buying huge amounts of soybeans. They were buying airplanes like Boeing. They were buying lots of semiconductors. I think 300 billion worth of semiconductors from the US. They were buying lots of technology from the US that they needed. So they were very dependent on the United States at the time, and I think if China started a full-blown trade war with the United States at that time, I think Trump would have had all the cards, and he would have really hurt China back then. However, I think what China did, they thought about it long and hard, and they said, you know what, we're not ready for a full-on trade war, but let's prepare for a full-on trade war. Let's diversify our supply chains. Let's diversify all of our industries. Let's bring everything home, and let's not rely on America anymore. So it's been a number of years that they kind of been working on this. They've been working on this for a long time. So one of the things that they did from this trade war, especially when they banned Huawei, and I think when they banned Huawei, a lot of people, including me, were asking for Apple to be banned from China, and they did not ban Apple from China, which was the right decision at the time. And I think what China did instead, they used all of this anger that the Chinese people felt from Trump's attack, and they use the anger for full in their advantage. And how did they do that? Well, first of all, they decided to go local with every single industry, starting with semiconductors. So they built their own, you know, semiconductor industry in China, starting from the beginning, ground up. For example, they started with the education, teaching young kids semiconductor knowledge and degrees. So they went on to all the kind of universities, and they pushed them towards teaching young kids how to become semiconductor engineers. And obviously, there's a lot of graduates who are coming through now, and these graduates are joining like companies like Huawei, like Alibaba, like BYD, and they are helping the next generation building the new AI chips. So they started from there. They also put a lot of research and development into semiconductor companies. They started building their own DUV machines, and there's a few companies who have just recently built their own DUV machines, which SMIC is testing. So they also put a lot of money into companies like SMIC, Huawei, to build their own semiconductor industry and supply chains. And companies like Huawei, SMIC have been building brand new factories all over China, and a lot of these factories are coming online. Like they came online this year, and there's lots of new ones coming online next year. And they decided rather than focusing on high end chips, they decided to focus on low end chips and make the low end chips the best possible way. And because China is a manufacturing power, and 70% of the chips that China needs are low end chips, and the rest of them are high end chips. Or maybe that figure is not correct. I think probably 10% are high end chips, and maybe 90% are low end chips. And these low-end chips are mainly for, you know, EV cars and all these devices. For example, fridges and all these TVs and things like that. You don't really need high-end chips for them. You only need low-end chips. So China was buying 300 billion worth of low-end chips from United States, from TSMC, from Samsung in Korea, and they were spending a lot of money. So rather than paying these companies, China decided to build their own, and they started to build their own DUV machines, investing in their own people, investing in the infrastructure. And these DUV machines, like the ones that ASML make, they don't make everything in Holland, in Netherlands. They have to import different parts and equipment from all over the world. So they only survive because of the supply chain. So, for example, they might buy the laser that comes from United States. They buy the mirror, Carl Zeiss from Germany. They buy neon gas. Used to come from Ukraine. Probably not now, but they also bring it from Russia as well, and a lot of it comes from China. They also need a lot of rare earths, which comes from China. So you see, they need a lot of equipment and a lot of materials from which comes from all over the world. China is the first country who have built a DUV machine with the supply chain all local, basically. So everything is local. They build their own lasers, they build their own software, their EDA software, they build their own the mirror I'm talking about as well. They have all the equipment that they need. They built it in house. The EUV machine, I think they are still working on, and that should be ready within the next year or two. And already, China's developed enough. They've developed their semiconductor industry enough to kick out Nvidia. Nvidia recently have said that they used to own 95% of Chinese market, which means 95% of the chips um, that China was using was Nvidia chips, and now it's gone to zero because of Trump's policies and Biden's policies, and because China has found a replacement now. Now Nvidia chips have been replaced by Huawei chips, and the Huawei chips, even though they're individually they're not as powerful as Nvidia ones. However, they found a workaround. They managed to. Huawei's main strength is networking and interconnects. So they found a way to basically interconnect all of the smaller chips or less powerful chips all into one to make one massive chip, which is more powerful than the most powerful NVIDIA chips. And and so they found a workaround, and these chips are much faster, much, they take less amounts of energy, and they're much more efficient. But the best thing is they are built in-house. So Trump cannot wake up one day and decide to ban these chips from China. So this is the best thing, and they are AI, they are 5G. So, I think in the first Trump trade war, China was really hurting, especially Huawei was really hurting because they couldn't buy any more high-end chips at the time. So it was quite humiliating for China at the time because Huawei had to buy 4G chips from remember Qualcomm. Yeah, Qualcomm. They had to buy 4G chips, and Huawei is a 5G company, so their phones could not use 5G because they were using 4G chips. And this was a humiliation ritual by the United States. They were saying to Huawei, "Okay, we want to make money, so but we don't want you to be technologically advanced. So we're going to sell you 4G chips, and that's the best we can do." So America was selling to China low-end chips, including Nvidia, by the way. Nvidia was selling not its best chips to China. They were selling these low-end chips, and these low-end chips had backdoors. They had security backdoors. They were they had tracking software and things like that. And China has come to a point where they said, you know what, we're not going to be humiliated anymore. We don't want your chips. You can keep your chip. We have our own chips. And just wait till the EUV chips come along, and then we will see. So the question is, why didn't China, retaliate with rare earths when they had the chance back then? So I think China needed everything to be ready first of all. So they needed to change their supply chains. They needed to diversify all of their exports and all of their imports as well. There's a lot of important things they used to buy from America. First of all, they used to buy, you know, um, oil and gas. So now oil and gas comes from Iran, comes from Russia, and comes from other countries as well as LNG as well. Even from Australia, they are starting to buy again. And they have diversified soybeans. They don't buy them from America anymore. Now they buy it from Brazil, from Argentina. They've diversified rare earth and steel, iron ore, which is another important part of of China's supply chain. So rare earths mines are all over the world, and also kind of iron ore mines. They're not just buying it from Australia; they're also buying a lot of it from um, Africa as well, especially Guinea, and all the technological technological devices they used to buy from America. Now China makes their own, which are much better than what America can provide and what Europe can provide. And the only thing that they still haven't got to America's level or European level is the semiconductors, which is the EUV machine. But that is still work in progress. I mean, there were people, haters, years ago, they said China would never in a million years would be able to make their own DUV machines, let alone an EUV machine. Well, guess what? They've made their own DUV machines, and their chips are performing much faster than Western chips. It's not about nanometers. You can say, oh, Taiwan makes 3 nanometers chips, or Intel makes 5 nanometers, you know, or Samsung makes 4 nanometers or 2 nanometers. It really doesn't matter about the nanometers. It really is it's all about how the chip performs, and how much energy it takes and things like that. So the new Huawei chips, takes much less energy, but it performs the best compared to Nvidia's top chip. And so you don't really need to go to like 2 nanometers or 1 nanometer. And China is producing these chips with the DUV machines. They don't really need the EUV machine. This is what shock. This is why shock. America's so shocked and Trump is so shocked because he's the one that started all these trade wars and he wanted to destroy China's industry and China's companies, but it completely failed. And what he has done is woken up the Chinese people into realizing America is a bunch of bullies, Trump is a bully, and for China to survive, they need to basically locally make everything in China. They cannot rely on the West. They cannot rely on its puppets in Japan or Korea or Europe because they're all puppets end of the day. Trump just makes one phone call to them and they will ban, Huawei or any other Chinese product. So China had to kind of stand on its 2 feet. So in the first trade war, China wasn't ready at that time to kind of start a full-blown trade war and blocked rare earths and stuff. However, in this second part two trade war that Trump has started, again, I got to remind people that Trump started this second trade war as well, is what you call Liberation Day. And I don't know if you guys remember Liberation Day when Trump announced all of these reciprocal tariffs against the rest of the world. And at the top of the list was China. China had the biggest reciprocal tariffs, I think about 67%. And China fought back. Then Trump decided to act like a child. He said, all right, we're going to go to 100%. We're going to go to 150% or 145%. He started acting like a child, basically. And since then, China decided, you know what, we're not going to buy American products anymore because Trump is unreliable. He's going to wake up one day putting all these tariffs on us. He's going to put all these restrictions on us. So we don't trust America anymore. We don't want to do business with America. So let's just stop buying soybeans from the United States. Stop buying, technology, oil and gas. So China decided to not to buy anything from United States anymore. And in return, obviously, um, there was a truce between America and United States. So there was a truce, around 3 months of a truce, where I think they didn't agree on a deal, but China agreed to relax some of the rare earths um, licenses, and in return, America said they will kind of stop with all of the export um, restrictions on China. But however, America could not help itself, or Trump couldn't help himself. Really, really, they couldn't help themselves. They are like gangsters or crooks. So, do you know there was let me show you this, guys. So there's a meeting that's supposed to be planned between Trump and Xi in South Korea, and this is a typical playbook by America. A typical playbook. Every time they arrange a meeting with China, they seem to add all these export restrictions a week before or 2 weeks before. And they just couldn't help themselves, guys. They always do that. Throughout the last 5, 6 years, every time, Trump or even Biden was supposed to meet with China, they slap on all these export tariffs a week before or 2 weeks before. And Americans see this as some sort of negotiation tactic, or they see this as some sort of bargaining chip. But it doesn't work with China, and it never worked with China. I mean, this is like schoolboy bullying. This is like gangster behavior. You arrange the meeting, and then 1 week before the meeting, you pull these export restrictions, and you use it as a negotiation tactics. I think Trump would be like, "Oh, we will get rid of these export restrictions, but you have to do this for us. You have to do that for us. If you don't, then we will double these restrictions. We will not take it away." And you cannot trust Trump or cannot trust America when they're like this, because it means that no agreement with them will be set in stone. They can wake up one day, add all these restrictions on you. They can, you know, burn any agreements they had with you. And Trump is known for burning agreements. Remember when he tore off the JCPOA, he tore off all these agreements that he had with Russia. One day he says something, next day he says something else. You just cannot trust Trump, and you cannot deal with him as a businessman because, in order to do business, you need stability, and Trump does not have stability. So anyway, Americans couldn't really help themselves, so they started, bullying China again with all these trade restrictions and stuff like that. And China obviously was not playing games, so they added the export restrictions on rare earths again. And um, and these these restrictions, these restrictions are really going to hurt America, because these restrictions not only add export restrictions to rare earths, but also they restrict the movement of export materials that make the rare earths. For example, so all the material that China makes to refine the rare earths in China. So they will restrict those materials as well. So not only can countries not have the rare earths, but they cannot also have the materials that make the rare earths as well, if that makes sense. So they are stopping all licenses, and not only to America, but also all the puppets, because China knows that if countries are puppets around the world. So, for example, with the EU or UK, they will buy a whole lot of rare earths from China, and then they will just give it to the United States, because that's how puppets work. So China had to force this rare earths to every single country, and they will give licenses to whoever, whichever company, whichever country they see fit, and which is the right way to do, because there's been a lot of smuggling of rare earths going out of China into these countries, especially to India as well. And you can see China would optimize rare earth export controls because they see a lot of countries smuggling these rare earths and sending it to America. So they're using like America uses using dirty tactics. Even India's doing this as well. So they had to restrict a lot of countries from doing that. So recently, Scott Bessent, who was supposed to meet the Chinese Trade Secretary leader, so he called him names. You can see here, Scott Bessent has called him an unhinged wolf warrior. I mean, this is not the right way. I mean, these guys, these guys are not serious. Trump, Bessent, Lutnick, these guys are not serious. They're just little babies. And they're just throwing out their prams because they don't like the way China is fighting back. And China is the only country fighting back against this trade war, by the way. No other country is doing this. Every other country has been subordinate to Trump. They've been kissing his ass, like he said. But China is the only country that is fighting with these with the trade war. All the other countries are either remaining quiet or they are kind of giving in to Trump's demands. And if all the countries got together, and the Europeans have missed a trick here. If all the countries, including Europe, got together and they all placed tariffs on United States and its goods, Trump will stop the trade war instantly because he cannot have a trade war with the rest of the world. If all the countries started putting trade restrictions and tariffs on all American products, American product will never be able to be sold anywhere around the world, and inflation will go through the roof in the United States because American consumers have to pay for these tariffs. So the Europeans and the rest of the world have missed a trick. They all should have kind of got behind China and they all should have placed tariffs on American goods. That would have ended the trade war instantly. Trump would have been forced to back down. But unfortunately, they didn't because there's a lot of puppets around the world that America controls. So this is not a good way to start off trade negotiations with your counterpart by calling them names, calling him unhinged wolf warrior. Is that going to help the trade negotiations? No, it's like, this is like gangster behavior. This is not how you deal with your business counterpart. I mean, if you're running a business and your business partner started calling you names and started being rude and insulting, are you going to deal with him? No, you're not going to deal with him. It's too much headache. You might as well just cut links and start build a new, partnership with somebody else. Because as a business, you don't want to be dealing with people that are not professional and they don't respect you. They don't, this is the way America is dealing with other countries. So they're not being professional, guys. They're not. They're being a bunch of kids, including Trump. I must say, Trump. He doesn't know what the hell he's doing. He doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. This is, you know, Trump may have got his way when he was a businessman. Back in the day when he was a property mogul. Trump, dealing with Trump Towers and all of that stuff. maybe business back then was much easier for him because he used to have a lot of yes men around him, and he had a property empire and stuff like that. Things were much easier, but you cannot have that kind of attitude with the international stage. With the international stage, you have to be a statesperson. You have to be more professional in the way you deal with countries. You cannot be calling people names. You have to be more stable. You cannot be having temper tantrums. You cannot be lying on a world stage. You cannot be playing games. This is what Trump is doing. He's playing games. He's being unprofessional, and it rubs off in his team as well, like Scott Bessent and Lutnick and other people. So yeah, China's had enough, and I think now is the right time for China to fight back with the trade war because China has been preparing this for maybe like 6, 7 years since Trump's first trade war, and China is now ready for a full-blown trade war. And China doesn't care because China's exports to the rest of the world is in record numbers, and we're talking about 1.2 trillion per year that China makes from exports. And the imports are basically not coming from America anymore, they're coming from all over the world. So again, China can, withhold their this trade war. And also China has been preparing in case, they get kicked out of SWIFT. They have built their own payment system, which is based on the digital RMB, and they're already implementing that to the rest of the world. And one example is, they were trading with American dollars with an American oh sorry, not rare earths, iron ore company with an Australian iron ore company, and now they China is actually doing business with them using RMBs because you know it's too risky to be trading with American dollars with an Australian company. So the Australian company has finally decided to basically trade with China with RMB, and now China is happily buying iron ore from Australia using RMB. So China is already diversifying. It's not just its trade, but also its currency. It's more and more countries are buying the RMB. More and more countries are trading with China with RMB. Even India is starting to buy Russian oil with RMBs as well. Previously, they did not. They were using rupees, but you can see the rupee has been falling drastically. It's one of the worst performing currencies in the world. So Russia has, rightly refused to buy rupees anymore, or refused to sell their oil using rupees. So India is now forced to kind of buy it with Chinese RMB, which is the right decision. And so I don't think China has been preparing for this trade war, but I don't think America has been preparing for a trade war with China. You see, China knew this day would come. However, Americans are so arrogant, so self-obsessed that they would never think that country like China would ever fight back, with a trade war against America. Because when you're an American president like Trump, you think you're the best. Nobody can kind of come near you. Nobody would dare to kind of fight back. Nobody would dare to have a trade war against you. However, he's wrong. He's wrong. This is why when you feel that you're so arrogant and you're the best, you don't prepare for anything. This is why China has come prepared and America is not prepared. So America is not prepared for this rare earth trade war because not only does America have to build up all its supply chains and infrastructure for rare earths. They have to start mining rare earths. Not only that, that's not the hard bit. That's the easy bit. The hard bit is the refining of the rare earths, and refining rare earths are extremely pollutant heavy, and this is why America doesn't buy from doesn't pollute their own rare, United States. I don't really refine it in United States, their own rare earths, because they rather China basically, you know, make all the pollution by refining it. And so they're basically exporting the pollution to China. The truth is, guys, Per capita, America is still the biggest polluter in the world, and biggest amount of pollution is done by the American Army. American Army have bases all over the world, and they produce more CO2 just for the army itself than China does. So obviously they're not going to say that because army and military stuff is not really part of any climate records or stats. They don't add it basically. But the US military is the heaviest polluter in the world by far. And per capita, United States is still the highest polluter, compared to China and India and stuff like that. So obviously they're not going to say that. Um, so yeah, they rather export the pollution to China, so they kind of pollute their own lands, and, refining these rare earths rather than America. They don't want that dirty job themselves, and they like to blame China for it for the pollution cause. So China is now saying, you know what? Let America build their own rare earth factories and refiners. Let them do it. Let them stop polluting their own lands. We don't care anymore. If America wants to do that, let them do that. And good luck to them, really. And this is like a perfect response by China because, first of all, it's going to take America 10, 20 years to build up these refining factories if they get the licenses, because getting these licenses, which are heavily polluted, is going to be very, very difficult. And I just don't think they're going to do that, to be honest, because Trump is only here for another 3.5 years. So if the next president comes along and he's more green or he's more China friendly, say, for example, let's just say Gavin Newsom becomes the next prime minister. I'm not saying he will, but let's just say he becomes one. He's more China friendly. He's more green, and he will roll back all of Trump's basically orders, executive orders. He will start making good relations with China. He will basically get rid of all these trade wars, barriers with China, and things will start again. So you see, I don't think this trade war can last. It all depends on who the next president is, because Trump is only here for 3.5 years. I think in this 3.5 years, Trump is going to cause a lot of headaches for the American public. I think there's this trade war and tariff war and the economic war he's going to have with China is going to really hurt the American people. And the American people are not ready for the amount of inflation and the harm and the pain that's going to come their way when Trump is fully engaged with this trade war with China. So it's not in Trump's interest to fight this trade war with China because they're going to lose. They're going to lose because China has all the cards. China can live without American semiconductors. They can live without all of America's technology. They can live without America's soybeans. They can live without America's oil and gas. They don't need anything from America anymore because China has diversified everything. Now they build their own semiconductors. They don't need the high-end semiconductors anymore because they found a workaround to the interconnect that Huawei does. They found a workaround you to have these high impact semiconductors that they can build using DUV machines. So they don't really need EUV machines anymore, even though they are building these EUV machines. But the point is, they don't have America doesn't have anything that can hurt China with. If they did, then Trump would have done it by now, because Trump is that kind of person. He's very vindictive. He's very evil. If he found a weakness in China, he would have done it right now, but he hasn't. He cannot fight China with anything. He's talking about stopping cooking oil or something from buying cooking oil from China. It's just something ridiculous. Because basically he's got nothing. He's got no cards to play with. He's got nothing. And China will win this trade war because America needs all these rare earths for their military. They cannot make weapons, F-35s and missiles without these rare earths. And if they cannot make these weapons, they cannot go to war. They cannot go to war with Russia or Iran or even Venezuela. And I think China, one of the main reasons they put these export controls on America, because all these wars that America is fighting against is China's friends. So America's plan is take out China's friends one by one. If they take out Russia, that's a huge amounts of, materials and rare earths and oil and gas that goes into China. That's a huge friend they they can take out. And if they can take out all of China's friends, they would all immediately gang up on China. So if they take out these friends one by one, they will come for China 100%. But China's not going to allow that. China is basically causing world peace by stopping rare earths to America because they are not allowing America to basically arm their industrial complex, military industrial complex, and start wars. So China is doing its best for world peace, and this is the way to do it. This is the way to go. So I'm coming to the end of my discussion here. So let's see if there's any other points I've missing. I've discussed this. So yeah, China is not afraid of the trade war, and again, they cannot trust America because of its double standards. And even Trump, he's threatening 100% new tariffs on China. But can you imagine Trump putting 100% tariff on China again? The last time he tried that, the markets crashed. And if he tried it again one more time, the market's even going to crash harder. And when the markets crash, Trump becomes a target from all the wealthy bankers and all the oligarchs that are hanging around Trump. They're all going to come after him because one thing these oligarchs do not like is losing money. So once they start losing money, Trump is going to be under huge amounts of pressure. So he's not going to try that again. Trump basically is in power and he's doing all sorts of favors for his oligarch friends, for his Jewish backers, and all these Madeline Albrights and all, Sheldons and all these people that are basically giving Trump money. He's basically making loads and loads of money back for them, doing them favors. Like in Gaza, all the Jewish backers is doing all the Jewish favors for him, and vice versa. So he's not going to accept. He's not going to take any risk, accept. Angering his oligarch friends. So I don't think he's going to do that. So I've already discussed that. So yeah, I've kind of discussed all the things I wanted to talk about. So let me know what you guys think. And do you think China's response was perfect? Is a measured response? Took years of planning. And let me know what you guys think. And I'll see you in the next video. Take care for now.